see if this works. Okay, awesome. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon to participate in this program as a part of the Law and Democracy Speaker Series. My name is Kyan Left Hand Thunder. I am a 26 studying government and Native American studies. I'm from the Fort Peck Indian Reservation in eastern Montana, and I am one of this year's Rockefeller Leadership Fellows, and a member of the Native Americans at Dartmouth and an editor at the Dartmouth Law Journal. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's program. Law and Democracy is a series of conversations that focus on foundational laws, policies, and institutions as we approach the semi-quincentennial milestone of the Declaration of Independence. This series builds on the Rockefeller Center's commitment to bringing our community together in discussion with a wide range of experts and practitioners to examine and deliberate on these themes. We are grateful to Dartmouth Dialogues for being a crucial partner in making this series happen. We would like to welcome our virtual attendees who are joining us today via live stream. For those joining us in person, when we reach the audience Q&A portion of our program, you can raise your hand, and one of our student assistants will bring you a microphone. Please be sure to wait for the microphone before speaking to make sure that everyone in the room and on our live stream can hear you. As a reminder, Dartmouth is committed to protecting free expression and peaceful dissent. We encourage you to ask questions during the Q&A, but ask that you do not interfere or disrupt today's program, which would include preventing attendees from seeing or hearing our guest and moderator or interfering with our guest and moderator's ability to speak or be heard. Today's program will be moderated by Professor Jason Barabas, Director of the Rockefeller Center and Professor in the Department of Government. We are thrilled to be joined today by the Honorable Thomas Westerman Wolf, class of 1971. Wolf is the former 47th Governor of Pennsylvania. He has served 2 terms from 2015 to 2023 and was re-elected to his second term with approximately 57% of the vote. A Democrat, Governor Wolf left office with a positive approval ratings from leading in state polls. And his endorsed successor, Attorney General Josh Shapiro, succeeded him as governor. Previously, he has served as chairman and CEO of his business, the Wolf Organization, in which he was the 6th generation of Wolfs to run the company, which was founded in 1843 as a dry goods store in New York, Pennsylvania. Governor Wolf received a BA from Dartmouth, interrupting his time at Dartmouth to serve in the Peace Corps in India, then returned to graduate. He went on to receive his master's in philosophy from the University of London and a PhD from MIT. His wife, Frances Donnelly, is an accomplished oil painter who has held exhibitions in the Lancaster Museum of Art, York, College of Pennsylvania, and the Artists' House Gallery in Philadelphia. The daughter of a U.S. diplomat, Frances was raised abroad in Iran, Germany, and France, Pakistan, and England. Their 2 daughters attended Dartmouth, Sarah, class of 2004, and Katie, class of 2006. Governor Wolf achieved significant milestones as governor across various areas, including education, healthcare, prison, and criminal justice reform, election reform, environmental reform, support for farmers, economic development, job creation, and fiscal responsibility, support for veterans, seniors, farmers, and especially during COVID-19's pandemic, and support for first responders. Among his many accomplishments are a $3.7 billion increase in funding for Pennsylvania's public education from pre-K through higher education, the Level Up formula for distributing extra funds to the state's poorest schools, adding $144 million funds for science, computer science, career and technical education programs, the expansion of Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act, and establishment of a state-based insurance exchange, bringing Pennsylvania's uninsured rate to its lowest ever. Community health choices to provide 400,000 seniors and Pennsylvanians with disabilities the support to lead independent lives and age in place. a reduction in prisons population by 10,000, and closing 2 state prisons. There's a lot here. Establishing early voting, vote by mail, and online voter registration and ballot applications. Launching the largest government solar energy commitment in the U.S. Raising the state's national ranking in non-farm job growth from the 48th in 2015 to the 20th in 2023. Moratorium on death penalty and issuing more pardons than any previous state administration. And by January 2023, the Commonwealth job rate was almost completely recovered from the massive unemployment rates during the pandemic. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming Governor Thomas Wolf and Professor Jason Barabas to the stage.
Is this working? Okay, great. So it's so great to be here. Welcome back to Dartmouth College, Governor Wolf. It's wonderful to have you back on campus. That was a wonderful introduction. There's really a lot to dig into. Hopefully we'll get time to go over parts of what you just heard, but also allow some time for the audience to weigh in on this as well. I guess let's just start right with current events. And we had an election on Tuesday, you may have noticed. And you were able to come by our election watch party at the Rockefeller Center, so we really appreciate that as well. There were major contests in Virginia and New Jersey, but also the New York mayoral race garnered a lot of attention. There's an important ballot referendum in California, and then of course Pennsylvania also had a judicial retention election. So give us your thoughts on that. What stands out? Were you surprised, or you kind of expected a lot of these results?
I was surprised at the. Can you hear me? Someone said I should. Here's my old professor, Nelson Castfierce. Good to see you here. I didn't mean old. I my former professor. Yeah. Well. Okay. I watched the returns with students, and I was, I think, impressed as they were with the change in generations. None of the people who were elected looked like me. They weren't old, and I think that was the beginning of a generational shift. I think they also looked different in terms of their politics. They weren't screamers. They were actually out there trying to do things that were aimed at helping actual people, not interests, not some abstract set of goals, but actually helping people. And I think that was a good thing. That's a good thing for. I'm a Democrat. That was a good thing for the Democratic Party, and it's a good thing for American politics.
I mean, they won by healthy margins, but your margins were a bit larger in your races too. So that's worth mentioning. Yeah,
I was lucky.
Probably we'll dive into that. I bet there was a little bit more. I've seen some preparation too. So what do you think this means for 2026 and beyond? I mean, was this, of course, there was a really historic election last fall, and the Republicans did really well, taking both houses of Congress and the presidency. So, are the Democrats back on track? Do you think the shutdown that we're currently experiencing? Do you think that that's played a role in this as well?
Yeah, I think what I found, and again, keep in mind that I'm a business geek, so that's what I spent most of my life in. Politics was brand new for me. I mean, I got into it in 2013 is when I started running, and I won. I caught the bus, and so my perspective on politics is probably very different from the traditional and maybe professional political view. So I think people do pay attention to policies and outcomes, and I think with the drastic things that are happening now, I think people are paying attention. Sure. Can you hear me now? I feel like I'm on a phone. But I think there are two dimensions. One is the policy output, and the other is the way you do it. And if you actually take things away that people have come to rely on, that creates problems, and I think we're seeing some of that right now. But I think there's a broader context here, and I think politics in general in the United States has been, I think, seen as more of a knockdown, drag-out fight than basically a exchange of ideas. I think, for example, in economics, we look at the market as a place of competition. But what we don't give enough credit to the market for is that it's also a place of exchange. And to do competition, takes one set of maybe characteristics, but to exchange, you need things like trust, like honesty, integrity, and things like that. Politics is the same way. It's a collective action, just like the market. And we do compete. Like we compete on a field of field hockey or football. But we also leave that field with the sense that we're in this together. And so I think people in politics have too often looked at politics simply as what the outputs are. And that's important. But I think what the elections to come are going to show, I hope, are a bigger commitment to things like ethics and virtue and the things that actually make exchange of ideas more palatable, more common. We're not there now. I'm hoping these elections may have given us a little bit of a sense that that's on the horizon.
All right, well, let's try to make some news here. Do you miss it? And you are prime age for presidential consideration. So have you thought about getting back into the game?
Absolutely not. And I think that was one of the things that helped me in politics, in talking to, I never had a majority of Democrats in either chamber in the 8 years I was governor. And I think as soon as they figured out I didn't have any ambitions, I wasn't trying to position myself for anything else. I wanted to do things for education and the fiscal stuff for the state. And when they figured that out, we started getting a lot of good things done. And so I think sometimes those ambitions can get in the way of actually transacting the people's business. So no, I don't have any ambition to do anything else. Read, eat, and sleep is what I'm doing right now.
Well, I want to come back to those topics in a second. This is, though, as you see from the banners behind me, this is part of our Law and Democracy series, celebrating the 250th anniversary of the United States, the semi-quincentennial, and of course, Pennsylvania played a pretty central role in that. And I know we've had you busy on campus speaking to the Rockefeller Leader Fellows, class engagements, election watch party, and you were also with the Geisel folks today too. But I really wanted to at least touch upon this really momentous time. This is sort of one of our kickoff events for that. And so could you just talk about what, you started this in Pennsylvania, you started, thinking about this semi quincentennial.
I can't pronounce it either.
I know it's a mouthful. We'll be ready the next time it goes to some even year. So,
I think it's an interesting time. The 250th is a time to, I think, reflect on how we started. We started off with some pretty noble ideals. Let's be honest, we never have lived up to those ideals. But I don't think we've stopped for long periods of time. We have not stopped trying to live up to those ideals. And so American history is a gradual and sometimes painful attempt to reconcile the noble ideals of the founders with reality on the ground. And I think the 250th should be a good time to think about those noble ideals and think about how far we are from achieving those things and what maybe we ought to do to get there. After 8 years in practical politics, I'm convinced we can make democracy work the way those founders thought it should work, or said they thought it should work. I think the 250th is a good time to basically make that statement and make that true.
The audience heard a long list of accomplishments that you've had. I guess I'd like to go back to some of those achievements that you might be most proud of, because there was a long list there, but also in this era of polarization in the United States, but you, in Pennsylvania, you didn't have legislatures that were, unified. You had to work with the other side, essentially, a lot of times, although you also vetoed a lot of bills as well. So, but maybe that was important too, to that collaboration.
Well, I think no one likes dealing with a wimp, someone who's just going to roll over. So periodically, I think you have to show that you do have principles, and as long as you're honest and open about it, they were fine with it. I mean, I had, I think, more vetoes than any governor since the 1970s. None of them were ever overridden. I think they only tried to override one, and that failed. So I think that actually was a reflection of how collegial we were, rather than how, I mean, sometimes they would call and say, you are going to veto this, right? Yeah.
They were urging the veto.
Yes, they were.
So there's a lot that, as we teach in our classes, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and it's important to peel back all the layers from the public version, and then what's going on in these chambers. And
Right. No. So, but I think what the 8 years proved to me was that actually virtue does have a place. It's wrong to think that if you're going to be fair-minded and equitable, that you're going to be seen as a naive do-gooder and you're never going to accomplish anything. And what I would like to show is that my 8 years proved that that's not necessarily so. Are there people who are wimps? Yes. Who go into politics and are rollovers? Yes. Are there people who are just intransigent in a way that this is non-constructive? Yes. I think there's a middle ground here where you can actually accomplish a lot. Hold on to your deepest principles, not sacrifice them at all unless you see something better, and actually get a lot of good things done. And that's what I think my 8 years showed, to me anyway.
Let's circle back even earlier then to your Dartmouth experience. As you heard, you have a pretty unusual trajectory through Dartmouth College. We're actually quite lucky you came back to Dartmouth College. You left not too long after you got here, and you went to the Peace Corps. That's noble, but also atypical in a lot of ways during the college experience. Could you talk a little bit more about that time and what you were thinking and what your parents were thinking and?
Well, my parents never really understood me, I don't think. But I have lived a pretty unconventional life, and it started actually before the Dartmouth experience. But I was here for 1 year. I got here in the class of 71, so I came here in 1967. Am I coming through okay? So I came here in 1967, and 89 wasn't finished, 91 wasn't finished. Hanover was really isolated. And I really enjoyed it, but there was a Peace Corps recruiting station on campus, and this was the era of the Vietnam War, which I opposed, but it was ironic, I was also in Naval ROTC. So every day we'd leave the class of ROTC and go by the line of protesters, of Vietnam protesters, which most of them were friends, so we'd sit and chat, and I finally decided, well, I don't really want to just sit back and watch or protest and the reason I was in Naval ROTC is because I read Horatio Hornblower when I was growing up, and I thought that would be a great thing to do. Anyway, and I was 19 years old, and at that point, to be in the draft, you had to be 26. So I figured 19 years, they had plenty of time to get me, and actually, if I came back, I left ROTC in good standing so I could get back in. So I figured it was just a perfect time to leave. And I had grown up as a kid. I loved it when Kennedy started the Peace Corps. I thought it was a great idea. I was just fascinated by that. And I thought about applying after high school, but the guidance counselor convinced me that I ought to go to college and I'd get that stupid idea out of my head. Well, I didn't. So I went across to the office, and some of if you're older here, you might remember there was a professor of languages named John Rassius who was here. And so the Peace Corps, because of that language thing, had a big presence at Dartmouth. I think the assistant dean of freshmen actually had been a Peace Corps volunteer. Anyway, so I went over to the office and I said, do you ever take anybody who hasn't graduated from college? And they said, not really, unless you have some specific skill. Do you have any skills? And I said, like what? And they said, well, like in agriculture. I said, well, I live in a small town in Pennsylvania, and there are farms all around. And they said, that's not good enough. And they said, so how are you at languages? And I said, well, I'm pretty good at languages. So they gave me this language test, and I think it was Ethiopian or something. I don't know what the language was, but they gave me 15 minutes to go through a list of vocabulary words and some simple syntax rules, and then they took that away and said, now take this test. And I must have aced it, because they said, yeah, you're in. Okay. so that's what I did, and I that summer, I ended up going off to Southern California to train to be a Peace Corps volunteer doing the Green Revolution. That was when, high-yielding rice was coming about. And it was, as a 19-year-old, it was the first time, I felt like I was actually in charge of my life. And the Peace Corps taught me a whole lot. I got a sense of efficacy and stuff. There's really nothing you can't do. And so I came back and lived off campus. I had gotten some advanced, back then Dartmouth actually gave you credit for advanced placement tests. Now apparently they don't as much. But so I had essentially sophomore standing. So I graduated a year. I was off 2.5 years, graduated a year later. So I figured 2 years in the Peace Corps was not going to. But when I got back, everything had changed. I felt like Rip Van Winkle. Everybody when I left had short hair. The big transgressive thing was to go into a fraternity basement and sneak a beer. When I got back, everybody was doing drugs. They had long hair. I was losing my hair. I mean, it was a whole different world. So that was my Dartmouth experience. Our daughters, and Frances is here, my wife. Our daughters came to Dartmouth, and that's how I really came to appreciate Dartmouth. They both had a wonderful experience. They were class of 04 and 06. They loved it.
And when you were in the Peace Corps, it was time spent in India too.
Yeah, I was in a remote village, pulled my water out of a well. It was great. It was, but I was on my own, and it was a heady experience.
I want to ultimately tie all this together, but let's switch the lens again, and audience members should be starting to think of your questions, because we're going to kick it to you in a few moments. But another unconventional part of what you did is you were thinking about running for governor, and then you had sold your business, but then you got back into it. So you put the political career on hold for a while because your business was top priority at that time. So I guess tell us a little bit more about that and the relationship to politics and perhaps how it shaped your style as a political leader too.
Well, my two cousins and I bought our family business at market value in the mid-'80s and went deeply into debt and managed the company for a number of years. And then by the time we got to 2006, it was really doing well, and so we sold it. And none of my kids and anybody else's kids wanted to go into it, so that was the end of the family line. And so I was retired, and at that point, Ed Rendell was the governor of Pennsylvania, and I knew him. And I think I was the only Democrat in central Pennsylvania he knew who owned a necktie. So he invited me to come up and become Secretary of Revenue. So I did that, sort of figuring, it was sort of like I did Peace Corps when I was a kid. Now I can do this kind of volunteer, do-gooder kind of thing. So I went up, and I was really impressed with what I saw in Harrisburg. I mean, I had been chairman of the United Way and Chamber of Commerce and all that kind of stuff, and done a lot of community stuff. But up in Harrisburg, they had the resources to do some really amazing things. And so I went over to him, and I said, you're term limited, and in a couple of years, you're going to be leaving office. And I said, I'd like to run for your office. Of course, he laughed and said, well, okay. And so I did. I started running, and he sent me around and gave speeches as Secretary of Revenue, and then I resigned as Secretary of Revenue and formed a campaign team in 2008. We had an apartment in Philadelphia. I had hired a campaign team, and we went down in 2000 and I guess 9 January to Obama's inauguration. And I figured I'd wait till after his inauguration to announce that I was running for governor for 2010, because naturally I didn't want to step on his shine.
News to be made that day.
Yeah. Right. So anyway, so we went around with all the state party people and it was in the delegation, and we were about to go out to the inauguration, and the phone in the hotel rang. We were sitting there. You had your coat on. We were ready to go out, and it was 2 of my former employees. They said, "Now, you can't do anything about this, and we're not asking you to do anything about it, but we just want you to know that this week we're going to declare bankruptcy." What? So I said, let's go through some of the financials here. So went down through and spent about 2 hours on the phone. Francis said I actually had 2 phones in my ear, my cell phone and the hotel phone. I was scribbling notes on a piece of paper, and sort of did some of the math and said, I think we can save this. So I went back and negotiated with the people who had bought the company and the other stockholders and the bank, and then bought it back. For those of you who are lawyers in the room, I bought it back at 100 cents on the dollar. I didn't play any games, and turned it around. So I figured the idea of running for governor was stupid anyway, so that wasn't going to happen. So this was now 2009, about February or March, I guess I'm back, and of course we're losing money and starting to go in the right direction. I blew the company up. We changed the business model, and all of a sudden it started making money. And in the middle of, because we were in residential building products, mainly kitchen cabinets, and that business actually started taking off in the middle of the recession. And so by 2013, this dream that I had of running for governor in 2010, all of a sudden I could think about doing it again. So I put the campaign team back together. I had paid them as if I had run through the primary, but came back together and said, let's try this again. And I won.
And the rest is history. Yes,
yes.
Fascinating. There's so much there to unpack, and you were on the precipice so many different times. Your life, you could have gone in so many different directions, in very different directions. And I've got a very different one here that I think also will be very illuminating for the audience. So you have a PhD in political science from MIT. That is unusual, and I see some applause in the audience from some fellow travelers. This is quite a distinction. Not only that, I think when we were talking before you came up, your dissertation won what's known as the Schatzsteiner Award, one of the top dissertation prizes in our field. So it was on Congress in the late 1880s and the early 20th century. Fascinating. So you could tell us a little bit more about that, because that's yet another unique aspect of your background and your accomplishments.
Well, actually, I was at MIT because Jeff Pressman, who had been here at Dartmouth, left Dartmouth and started teaching at MIT. And when I was in London, I was doing Indian politics, and I figured the idea of an American doing Indian politics probably wasn't really a good idea. I ought to do American politics. And I got serious about academia, and Jeff Pressman was there, and he encouraged me to apply to MIT. So I did and got in. And so I ended up there. He was there, and there was another guy named Walter Dean Burnham who was my advisor. And big in American politics. I went to MIT because, first of all, because Jeff Pressman was there, but also because I wanted to be a quant. That was the thing back in the 70s. I'm an old man. That was when in the 70s everything was mathematics, and if you wanted to be a quantitative person, man, that was the place to be. So I went to MIT, and my dissertation did win the National Dissertation Award, but I think the most sophisticated math was percentages. So I never really used any of the sophisticated math modeling.
All
that
the mainframes could do at that time.
That's, yeah. I think the mainframe at MIT was only like I don't know, 64K or something like that. I don't think it was that big. But, and then Jeff, was going to take a sabbatical. And the department launched a nationwide search for a successor, and they didn't like anybody. So then Jeff died, and they decided that I should take his place. So I ended up teaching as an instructor. I didn't even have my dissertation finished. I didn't even have it started at that point. But I taught for parts of 2 academic years, I guess. Introductory American politics, Congress. It was, and I really enjoyed it. And I remember we got to the point where it looked like maybe they would offer me a full, a tenure track position or something. So thinking of that, we had been renting in Boston an apartment, and Francis and I started looking for an apartment to buy. And we were walking through Copley Square, and I said, we went by the public library, and I said, if I publish some books and maybe get tenure, maybe someday they would invite me to become a member of the board of the Boston Public Library. And then I walked on for a couple of steps, and I said, well, you're an idiot. If you just go back to your hometown, you could be chairman of the board of your library in probably 2 months. So I said, so what is it you really want to do? And I realized at that point what I wanted to do was just not work for anybody else. I wanted to be my own person. And so I figured my parents were of an age, and my uncle and aunt, they owned 60% of the company, and they were at the point where they were looking to sell the company. And so I got 2 cousins and said, why don't we think about going into debt and buying it? And that's what we did. But I started out driving a forklift. So I think I was the only PhD forklift operator in Pennsylvania.
You have your card, your union card
That's right.
of academia.
That's right.
Yes. So I want to take some time. I've got a few more questions, but I know there are a lot of audience members out there that probably want to ask you some questions, especially we've covered so many different areas. So I'm hoping that we can tie it all together. It's just been fascinating to kind of study your background and to look at your trajectory. So let's, we've got a person with a microphone. If anyone's got any questions, we've got some students. We do like to go to student questions first. So I see one right over there, perhaps, and then we'll come back over here too. And please tell us your name, your class year, and maybe where you're from. That would be helpful.
Hello, my name is Levi. I'm a 29 from Seattle. And I was curious, in the present day with Republicans controlling all 3 branches of government, a lot of Democratic mayors and governors have kind of emerged as the face of resistance to the Trump administration or leaders of the party because congressional Democrats don't have a lot of power. I think this contrasts a lot with what you were talking about of governors focusing a lot on specifically how to help people in real world bread and butter politics. And I'm curious what you think the role is of governors and local leaders in participating in national politics, which I don't think is necessarily a negative thing. How do you think they balance those 2 roles?
Yeah, thanks, Levi. That's a great question. When I first got elected, I was a novice, so I just went around and knocked on people's doors, Republicans and Democrats, senators and representatives. And there was one conservative Republican senator who said, here's how I see my job. He said, you and I aren't going to see eye to eye on much of anything I know, but here's how I see my job. He said, and he was from a rural area of Pennsylvania. He said, I think of that family down the street, down the road, that are struggling to make car payments and keep up to date on insurance. They have mortgage payments or rent. They're trying to make sure that their kids are going to the best possible school, but they have payments they have to make for braces and all kinds of stuff like that. They have to feed themselves and all those things. What is it that they actually need? And what is it that I can control? not a whole lot, but what is it that I can do to maybe make their lot easier? And I always thought that was sort of a really interesting way to look at things, rather than, the macro system of, what do I need to do to pull one over on Congress or that kind of, what is it that someone needs here? And as a governor, and I actually got along with most of the county commissioners in Pennsylvania are actually Republican. I got along with them because we actually had something in common. We're executive branch people. We're trying to get something done. We're not just sitting here pressing a button, putting our finger in the air. And most of them, and certainly me, I wasn't going anywhere after this, so I was just trying to do what we thought was going to help. And sometimes Washington can be helpful in that regard. Sometimes not so much. For the most part, you can still be free to do a lot of interesting things. And a state like Pennsylvania, we're the 5th largest state in the union. We have a $50 billion general fund budget, but then with money that comes in with Medicaid and sort of federal funds, it's more closer to $100 billion dollars now. And so there's a lot of stuff that you can do in a state with that kind of resources. So I always looked at it not so much, what do I need to do with Washington and other states. I just looked at basically Pennsylvania. We can do a lot of stuff on our own.
A lot of other hands up here. I guess we'll go right over there and then right over here. And again, your name and your class and where you're from.
I'm Max. I'm a 29. I'm from Needham, Massachusetts. And my question kind of circles around, you talk a lot about how not a lack of ambition, but like a lack of being, for lack of a better word, a career politician is beneficial to politics and beneficial to getting things done. But at the same time, our country is, since the election of Trump, kind of shocked by this idea of a lack of experience in their politicians. And that's been a theme of, as we saw in New York, this election, and a theme of many successive campaigns, that experience is what pushes people forward. So how do you reconcile this idea that the people who aren't career politicians are the strongest in politics, but also you need experience to succeed in politics?
Well, I'm not sure that I agree with either one of those things. I'm not sure
That's
you
okay,
need.
then I wanna hear.
I'm not sure you need experience in politics. I think I was helped by experience as in business. One of the things I think I keep thinking, I think I mentioned this to you, when Dwight Eisenhower, remember him, was elected president of the United States, his predecessor, Harry Truman, was concerned. He said, because politics is really persuading people to do things. It's not pressing a button and having them salute you and doing what you want. And he was concerned that Dwight Eisenhower would have a problem with that because he was used to having people salute him and just saying, yeah. And I think people think that's the way business works. It really doesn't. It's all politics. It's all persuading people. It's all bringing people together and convincing them to do the thing that you want them to do, or be convinced that you're wrong. And so there really wasn't much of a difference. I wasn't a politico, that's true, but I was not inexperienced at administration or management. And I think that's what we really need. If a career politician is defined as someone who is really good at campaigning and getting elected, that's actually not necessarily what we need in an executive who's going to manage a lot of people to try to get things done to help people in their lives. And so I don't think I was at disadvantage by not being a career politician. I think there are good career politicians there are career politicians who have good management skills, and there are career politicians who are just doofuses. But that's true in business too. So I mean, it's just I felt actually right at home being up in Harrisburg. Actually, I remember when I went when I was first starting to run, I went to the state head of the state AFL-CIO because I was running as a Democrat, so I wanted to get his endorsement, and he said, absolutely not. But he said, it would be kind of interesting to have somebody who has, I don't know if you know, the AFL-CIO has a scorecard for politicians called COPE, the Committee on Political Education. And the ones, you have to have a really almost perfect score for them to endorse you. Well, I didn't have any COPE score because I'd never been in politics. And he said, to the guy sitting next to him. He said, you know, it would be interesting to have somebody in politics who actually managed people, rather than someone who had a good score on COPE and, you know, sat in Congress and you know, voted on legislation. And I kept reminding him of that after I got elected. He refused to. He didn't endorse me, and we remained friends after that. But he was I think saying something that actually is true. You know, it would be nice to have people who actually look at a job as governor or some executive branch job like that as a means to help people to actually get something done, which is what you're trying to do if you're a successful business executive. It's what you should be doing if you're a successful political leader. So I don't think being a, you know, I think the reason it helped me, by the way, specifically was because I had Republicans in both houses of both chambers of my legislature. And so I think it gave them some comfort that they looked at me as not a threat, that if they made me look good, it wouldn't be bad. I think one of the problems that I think Josh Shapiro is facing right now is that he does, people around say, you know, he does look like a future president. And so, he does have now one of the chambers is Democratic. But the Republican chamber is basically just trying to make sure he doesn't get anything done, I think. So I think that helped me in a Republican-dominated legislature, but I'm not sure it would help anybody. What really helps is having ability to manage. Yeah.
Well, that was good because this event is co-sponsored by the Dartmouth Dialogues too. So the difference of perspective was something we were trying to work in here as well. So we have a gentleman with his hand up here in the front who's been very patient. So.
Hello, I'm Tuna, and I'm a Turkish American actually. I'm a 26, and I actually wanted to ask about John Fetterman. I mean, you ran on the same ticket with him, and I think you worked together with him. He was your lieutenant governor, and I think it's working. But so my question was, I mean, obviously it turned out to be a different way than a lot of people expected. Could you see something like that, or do you tie it to something like, you know, his health stuff? But could you see it, you know, and then the 4 years you worked with him, and, you know, and then the campaign, yeah.
Okay, so yes, I worked in Pennsylvania. The lieutenant governor is nominated independently of the governor. We're elected together, but he's nominated independently. So I think he ran against maybe 4 or 5 other people, including the incumbent, who he beat pretty handily. And there's no question about it. John is a unique buckaroo. And you know, he and I grew up like 6 miles apart from each other. He's actually from York County, and everybody thinks he's Pittsburgh in Western Pennsylvania. He's actually Central Pennsylvania. But he and I agreed on things like legalization of recreational marijuana. We agreed on the LGBTQ protections, things like that. So we worked together fairly well, and I think he was very energetic. Then he ran what he wanted to do for Senate, and then he had the stroke, and I think that really that was a real change. It was really tough, and he did use it, I think, effectively in his campaign, where he said, "I know what it's like to be knocked down on my back," which he was. But I'm not sure how much that affected him in terms of the person he's become. I have not been in touch with him since then, since the campaign. So I'm not sure that I'm as well informed as I should be about this to answer your question. But that's as far as I know. When we worked together, we worked together pretty well.
He came through Dartmouth about a year ago, and so you can go on the Rockefeller Center webpage and find the video of that too, if you want to see his exchange in this very auditorium too. How about some other questions as well? How about right over here? And then we'll come back over on the other side.
Hi, I'm Vincent. I'm from Chambersburg.
Oh, that's Pennsylvania, by the way, Chambersburg, Pennsylvania.
And like in 2015, like this is gonna be like a little self-insert, but you visited my elementary school, which was Benjamin Elementary. Yeah, which was like.
How did I do?
Wait, no, like I feel like that was so impactful, especially at such a young age. Like, my main issue with Chambersburg is that there's like not a lot of room for like public discourse, especially since it's like a rural area. Yes, it has like a lot of urban traits, but like it's still like not very normalized. So like I kind of like my question is like how do you suggest the gap in political education understanding be bridged in contrasting realities in Pennsylvania and just like the US in general?
Well, so you're from Chambersburg. Chambersburg is 2 counties over from where I grew up, and it is a different area, but it seems to me that there's a basic decency. I think there's all kinds of issues. We can be very narrow-minded. We can be I think intolerant. But I think, and I grew up there, so I'm biased. But I think there is an element of decency, and that's where I think sort of the idea of opening up and not sort of predisposing yourself to arguing, but sort of saying, okay, tell me a little bit about why you think that way. Why are you saying that? And if you do it in a way that's not confrontational, I think you can actually come to a good place. In York County, which is deeply red, I didn't win York County in either one of my home county. Repeat that. I lost both times. But I grew up there, and I loved the people I grew up with. They didn't vote for me, but I really enjoyed growing up there, and I think it gave me a sense of. And I went to the public school. I went to private school for the last 2 years of my life, but went through local public school. I really enjoyed it, and I think one of the things that we need to drop is our own intolerance and our own inability to see virtue in maybe somebody we're talking to. And if we do that, people generally can open up. I think part of the problem is we're in this sort of death spiral right now where we're just yelling at each other, and that just creates more yelling. If we sort of just said, okay, let's do a little unilateral disarmament here and try to figure out what's actually going on. I found in my 8 years in Harrisburg with people who, some of whom are from Chambersburg, that actually we could actually get some things done. That state senator I was talking about is actually from Adams County, right, the next county east of Franklin County. You're from Chambersburg too?
Oh,
Wow.
wow, lots of hometown folks here.
Yeah, that's great.
So let's try to get a few more questions in. Let's try to go over here, maybe in the back there somewhere.
Hi, my name is Reese. I'm a 28. I'm from Northern California. In American politics, you often see candidates weave between the executive and the legislative branch in various levels of government. You yourself were not a member of the legislature before getting elected to the executive branch.
Right.
And as I believe you've alluded to throughout this conversation, the two branches use completely different skill sets. So one is not necessarily an advantage for the other. But how has your past, specifically as a family business owner, helped in giving you a good skill set for the position you had as governor in the executive branch of Pennsylvania?
I think it really goes back to what the AFL-CIO chair said, that it would be interesting to have somebody as governor who actually managed employees. And I think that was what really helped. Josh Shapiro, for example, had a very distinguished career as a state representative in Pennsylvania. And then he became a county commissioner in Montgomery County outside of Philadelphia, and then attorney general. But someone asked him if he would like to be a senator, and he said, absolutely not. He wants to be an executive, and that's sort of the way I feel. I think they're two different mindsets. I know you're right. There are people who sort of move between the two, but I'm not sure how they do that. And I'm not sure how, if you're ever a governor, how you can ever go into be a legislator. My dissertation was on the House of Representatives. I love that institution dearly. I'm not sure how you do that. So I think that it's the management skills. It's just the ability to recognize value in the people you have. So I think I was able to do that in large part when I was governor of Pennsylvania, and I think that put me in good stead. So we could do some good things.
Fantastic. Let's try to get a few more in. There's some hands back there as well, and Devorah will help. This might be the last question.
Hi, I'm Maya. I'm from State College, Pennsylvania.
Another Pennsylvania, I tell you, this is great.
We're both from State
Could
College.
we have
All right.
raise your hand if you're from
That's right.
Pennsylvania in here? Lots of
So-
Pennsylvania folks here. All right. See?
So you know, just for those of you who are not from Pennsylvania, there is a university in State College. Are you aware of that? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I would have been there if my parents worked there, because then you get a 75% off discount. But I was wondering, what role do you think student activism had in like the Democratic successes in the recent elections in PA especially? And then what do you see as the role of student activism in the future of the Democratic Party?
I think students have a big role to play because the party needs to change right now, and institutions like parties and old people like me don't change that. We're sort of rigid, and we need to be prodded. And I think the role for there's a need for a generational change. I mean, Nancy Pelosi just announced today she's not running for re-election. We need more of that, and we need more people like the Mamdanis of that age who are coming in. You know, are we going to agree on everything that they're doing? No, but they're fresh faces, a fresh perspective, and I think the real thing that you bring is that you're really fed up with what my generation has imposed on you. Us boomers have not done a great job, and so you need to clean up the mess, and that's not going to be done by my generation anymore. I think that's the legacy we've left to you, and we're really depending on you to do that. So I think students have a real big role to play in terms of students, your age group. I mean, there are a lot of your ages who are not in places like Dartmouth. You all have a big role to play in moving us to a constructive future that may look very different from the future, from the present that we handed you. But I think you have a big role to play in making that happen.
Well, I was going to ask for advice for students, but you need to clean up that mess is a pretty good tagline, so I don't know that we really want to step on that at all. That's going to probably be in the newspapers tomorrow. This has been great. It's been so wonderful to have you back on campus. Thank you for sharing your time with students, your perspective. I want to thank our partners, the Dartmouth Dialogues. I also want to thank our student assistants. So we've got Ryan and Kian and also Gabby right here taking photos too, so I really appreciate those. And then our staff, dedicated staff at the Rockefeller Center, Devorah Greenberg-Colling, and also Madison Peel. They were instrumental in helping to make all of this happen, so we really appreciate those folks as well. Let me give just a quick teaser to two events we have coming up next week, and it's a different form of the Corps, so that we've got a Marine Corps veteran, a graduate, Nate Fick, a 99 graduate, coming back to Dartmouth next Tuesday, I believe, for our Veterans Day week celebration, and then at the end of next week, we have Senator Rand Paul coming in here for a date, an engagement during the day too. So please keep tuned to the Rockefeller Center web page and the events pages, and we hope to see you at those events as well, or online. Good. Thank you for all of you joining us online as well. So thank you. Join me in thanking Governor Wolf.